because I've been told that he has no patience for photos. So I'm like, okay, so you got to, really got to work hard with those kind of people. And he was really generous. We got more time than we expected. He was quite obliging. He's a very difficult man to photograph. And it's just so funny because all these people are like, wow, you can really, when the cover came out, you can really see the weight on his shoulders. I'm like, man, I was waiting for any of this to happen. That's just how he stands.
When we think about the food industry, I guess we usually think about the producers, the chefs, the restaurateurs, and the people that work in restaurants. But there are a lot of other people that work in and around the industry. And I suppose I'm one of those, working as a food writer. And another one of those is Kristoffer Paulsen, a photographer who does all kinds of photography, but is definitely known and loved for his fantastic food photography. Kris, thanks for coming along and having a chat with me today on Dirty Linen.
It's my absolute pleasure, Dani.
Now, Kris, I spoke to you on, it was that Monday before everything started to just close in upon us. And I'd been up in northeast Victoria doing a bushfire recovery story because, hey, remember the fires? And I was returning my hire car to an Avis or Budget or something down up near RMIT. And as I was walking out of there, just feeling really strange, and it was windy and that part of the city gets dusty and there was like dust blowing into my face. Yeah. My phone rang and it was you. And you'd had this idea to do like a pasta drive because restaurants were freaking out. Nobody was going out and you thought, let's move some pasta. And I just feel like you kicked me off into a kind of pandemic action, which hasn't really stopped. And
well, I'm certainly glad to take credit for everything you've done for the last 6 months. Thank you very much.
Well, now it's bloody October, and it's just crazy.
It's so mental, isn't it?
It's so crazy, and I put this page on my website, like rescue pack pasta for pickup, and restaurants started making pasta and people started eating it. And I suppose, you identified really early on that there was going to be, need at different places on the food supply chain. And as we know, things became really disrupted, really fragile and vulnerable.
But do you love it how my dumb brain works? That I think I was like making pasta for our dinner, like just rolling some out, and I think my brain, when you kind of track a thought, and it went something like, "Hey, I'm making pasta. No one can buy pasta in the supermarket. Maybe I can make pasta." And then I was like, "Well, no, back up. And like, hang on, wait a second. There's restaurants that make this shit." Oops, sorry, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
You can say whatever you want.
And like, oh wait, hang on. There's restaurants that are making all this stuff, and there's no one going to the restaurants. So maybe that would be more sensible than me trying to make pasta for anyone more than 3 people. And then we've all got our pasta contacts, I guess. I've just been working with Johnny and Maria at 400 Gradi, and obviously the beautiful mates at 200, and all those kind of people. And wasn't it amazing how just like within a couple of days, everyone kind of just did this massive about turn? I know the Gradi guys were already kind of thinking a bit about it already, but they just within like a couple of days, found a warehouse down the road from the restaurant and like just rammed it full of every beautiful, Italian good you could think of, just all in the space of a couple of days, isn't that? And it's still there. You can still go and get a 400 Gradi pizza out, in the street, and it's still like as amazing as it ever was. But that's been there since kind of around about the time we had that conversation. Like, it's just mind-boggling. Yeah,
it is. So tell us what you've been up to over the past 7 months.
We just kind of had a bit of a funny one in a way. Like we had a baby, and my wife and I. So I should say my wife had a baby in early April, so the 6th of April, which has kind of made it, a slightly, even more strange time. So we've, kind of had that, that early baby enforced lockdown anyway, but, with the, just the weird added bonus of this as well. But, um, I think, so, I mean, I've been, doing a little bit of work like the rest of us. Like, I'm really fortunate that, in lockdown 4 that there's the journalism permit that I can get when you're working when I work for the paper, which has been a real godsend. But I mean the rest of it, it's been really not much. Like we've been getting our allowances, which are due to stop any second now. And a few little government bits, but for the most part, we've just been at home, hanging out with the kids and doing the work that we can. Like myself and like a lot of other people in this industry kind of had these like bumper July to September quarter when everyone was trying to catch up with all the work that they couldn't get out, in lockdown 1. So I think I worked like 27 days straight at one point.
Wow.
Yeah, which is mental. And then that meant that my July to September quarter was just, like 30% higher than last year, which means, of course, that now I can't get JobKeeper, which is great. Even though we had like the quarter before that was through the floor, and now this one will be as well. But now we're ineligible, which is kind of making things interesting. But we've done a little bit of, helping out some hospo buddies to get their stuff on for their, online stores and that kind of thing. I've been able to, I was in the studio the other week for a good weekend piece on the arts, which was just amazing, photographing real people in a real studio, which is very strange. Um, I've had like a couple little government construction documentation things, but other than that, like it's really not much, but at the same time, still a lot more than a lot of other people have been able to do, that's for sure.
Well, as a sort of, insider, outsider to the hospitality industry, what kinds of things have you witnessed, experienced, felt from your mates in hospo?
Man, where do you begin? One thing that I
Yeah.
was really struck behind that, right? I was really struck by, and I keep coming back to, is that I think no one really talks about the bosses, and they're the kind of ones I worry about the most. Because the thing I hear them over and over again from so many different people is that, and maybe less as much now, but definitely, um, it's definitely been a recurring theme. Is a lot of them just say, "Man, if I didn't have visa holder staff members, I wouldn't even be bothering." Which I'm sure you've heard this as well.
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy. Like all these people that, I guess the people that can't get the benefits or whatever. So, these businesses are just staying open just so they, they get some more vulnerable members of their staff, don't starve. Um, and just that kind of responsibility is just hardcore. Like, these, I'm just thinking of people like, I think Christian from Embla and Joey from Mr. Bianco and Victor and people like that have all said this, where they're just, you know, like if they could just stay home and pay all their staff JobKeeper, it would be so much more simple. Um, rather than running these businesses that aren't necessarily going to be making any money. Um, just keeping the lights on and keeping people, paid rather than, going hungry. Um, but
It's a
but
strange,
then there's
yeah.
but then there's the people who are, doing raw. Like there's a cafe up the road from our house, Zendan, and it almost seemed busier in there, and I kind of get the feeling that they're potentially maybe the turnovers maybe even up because just everyone wants to get out for a walk and go and get a coffee, and now they don't have to worry about people sitting inside, and I know that for them that little brief opening was just so stressful having to sanitize all the tables and then take bookings, which I'd never done before, and just like for them it's kind of simpler just to have takeaway only, I guess, but then like booze people are all kind of doing roaring trade because everyone's stuck at home, and it's a weird one, isn't it? Like how it's so irregular throughout different sectors and different producers and all that kind of stuff. Um,
Mm,
anyway,
yeah. Well, I've definitely thought over the period, I lost a lot of work at the start of the pandemic, just as you did, but I never felt that sort of crushing weight of the responsibility of having employees. And I think when you've got that to add to your all the things you have to think about, it is so much. It's so much, and look, different people have done it in different ways, and but I think it's a weight, and it's a funny one, isn't it? Because the stated aim of JobKeeper was to keep people connected to their businesses, but it's funny that those who have had, if they were fortunate enough to have all their employees on JobKeeper, they could then close those businesses and actually not really have any contact with their staff. Yeah,
like people have. Like I've got a friend who's a chef who lives around the corner, and he works at a cafe in Coburg, and they just closed because they could all get JobKeeper, and he sat at home for however many months, and he's only just gone back to work like last week. Isn't that amazing?
Right. Yeah,
but
it is.
And I think one thing that's been so frustrating is just watching the kind of the politicking between the left and right and between federal and state. How you see people I won't name names, but significant hospitality people will be getting on Instagram and bashing the Victorian Premier and saying step in and help us, Scott Morrison. We need to save all our workers. It's like, well, hang on, but you're forgetting the person that made that decision to exclude visa holders in the first place. Like, none of these people are innocent, and I'm definitely not interested in advocating left or the right or whatever. But it's just like, this is the one time when everyone needs to work together and so, instead of kind of, shifting the blame, wherever they can. It's like, this is the one time. Can't we just get together and work it out rather than, just kind of, putting our feet on each other's throats, just trying to, just, I don't know, just kind of escape any kind of responsibility, when meanwhile, like we just said, imagine that responsibility of having 10 visa holders on your staff that you've then got to, you're their only hope of actually making any money and feeding their families. It's insane.
Yeah, well, it did feel like, that early weeks of the pandemic that there was going to be togetherness and solidarity, and we were all going to stand, side by side and face it together. And I guess that frayed in various ways over the ensuing months, and now, especially, well, perhaps only in Victoria, it is feeling quite fractured. Hopefully, as we slowly reopen and regroup, that fabric will knit back together somewhat. And there will be a sense of solidarity. I mean, there's definitely been a sense of community threaded through this, I think. And, we've seen that, I suppose, people have seen that in their businesses and their business communities and their neighbourhoods, for sure. Kris, I want to talk about a couple of images of yours that I've seen through the pandemic that have been particularly striking, and perhaps we'll deal with the one that may lead us back to politics first, and then we can put that to one side. But it was a photo of the Victorian Premier Dan Andrews that appeared as part of a profile piece. Can't remember when it was. Maybe it was May, somewhere around there.
It was before the second lockdown, that's for sure. I think.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. We were asked initially, they wanted to photograph him in his home, where he kind of, this is how long ago this was, and talk about how he ran the state from his desk at home. And this is lockdown 1, but then he's obviously a busy guy, it's hard to lock down, and then that didn't go ahead. But instead the decision was to photograph him on Parliament steps. I have this thing in my head where I don't like to make preconceived judgments about people before I photograph them. And that sometimes draws me criticism. I mean, I photographed George Calombaris for the Good Weekend a while back, and that was before, it was the infamous cover where that week, the wage scandal came out, which was really a real bummer because they've got such a long lead time on the printing that they can't change it. Once it's done, it's done.
Yep.
And I had people like say, "How dare you? How could you photograph him knowing all this stuff?" It's like, well, that's not for me to decide. Like it's my job
All right.
to hold a record of this person, and that's up for you to make. It's up for the person or the viewer to make their own, to draw their own conclusions. And I feel really strongly about that. Like I've photographed politicians that I really don't care for, but it's not. I just have this thing where like I feel like it would be really doing a disservice to the publications or the public, all those people, and myself. Like if I allowed my thoughts to really push it in any way. But then so like I really wanted to like I always want to make the person look the best that they can. I want them to want their personality to come through. I don't want like a political PR shot. I don't, but at the same time, I don't want something that's going to drag them down. And like, to be honest, like at that point, I thought, the poor guy, he's done it. He's done the best he can. This is Dani Andrews that shot down the Cross City Tunnel and then found out that it had already been paid for. Like loads of years ago when he got in. So I've always felt a bit of a sympathy towards him. So it came out. We had half an hour with him, so we decided we were doing it there. I'm like, and so he's a funny little one. So I'd seen on his Instagram that he'd been making pizza with his sons, and I'd just been working with Johnny and Maria at 400 Grady, and I had some of their flour on the cupboard. I'm like, because these people often you've got 30 minutes, you got to get you've got to build a rapport, shoot it all in that time. So I bought a bag of 00 5 stagioni pizza flour with with me, 'cause I'm a little bit of a pizza nerd, just to kind of win him over, and it was amazing. Like it worked so well. Like he's like, "Oh, this is great, mate! Oh, I can't wait to try it." And all of a sudden we're talking about using sparkling mineral water instead of water, and it's like, "Oh, it's like using lemonade and scones." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess it is, Dan." And so it was nice. It was a nice icebreaker, and then we kind of did the shoot, and it'd been raining, and kind of did a couple of options, and he stayed longer because I'd been told that he has no patience for photos. So I'm like, okay, so you got to, really got to work hard with those kind of people. And, he was really generous, and we got more time than we expected. He was quite obliging. He's a very difficult man to photograph. Like stand up, Dan. I haven't stand. Oh, okay. Um, and it's just so funny because all these people are like, wow, you can really, when the cover came out, you can really see the weight on his shoulders. I'm like, man, that was way before any of this happened. That's just how he stands.
Right.
um,
Interesting.
yeah, and it's just people always do that. They'll put their own readings on it. But yeah, and it's interesting. That story got a lot of criticism from, I guess, the more left-leaning people because the cover line was "Not Happy Dan," which the Good Weekends line was that's the feeling in the community that talking about. But then people will read that as the publication saying that, which is just classic. It's just that kind of stuff always happens, right? But so then there's this feeling that the publication's got an agenda, which they don't. And I think Mel Fife, who wrote the piece, wrote a very fair piece, which raised the questions, which ended up being huge issues months later, which she really accurately preempted them. And this is funny. This is how different things were. I pitched that we shoot him in a mask, like as in he's up the front line doing his scene, and they said, "Oh no, we feel that that our advice is that only frontline workers and medical staff should be wearing masks." Then that's how different it was. That's how different it was,
Yeah.
and this isn't very long ago. So it's just amazing
Sure.
how quickly it's all moved, isn't it? Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Interesting. Do
I
you do
don't.
you read a piece before you photograph it, or do you ask for the sort of vibe of the piece? Or
I try to. Like, I've got two very different views in my mind. One part of my brain says I don't want to know anything. I don't want other people's views to sway my experience as someone. But then sometimes you want to know as much as you can, and I think no, that's right. This one changed a lot. It changed a lot as she was writing it because oh, that's right because phones are still coming back to me. So at that point, it was just after the branch stacking thing happened.
oh
So he
yeah.
was flustered from that. That's how long ago that was. So that like, all this thing, none of the hotel thing had really blown up yet. I think it was maybe happening, and I don't think the Flemington outbreak had happened yet. So
Yeah.
yeah, the biggest thing he was stressing about was branch stacking. Like that's like what a crazy thing that is. Um,
Yeah. What a great
so I
problem to
think
have, though.
I
Seeing where
know,
he is
right?
now.
So I think that one I hadn't read because it wasn't written yet, because it was still
Yeah.
being written. Whereas other ones, like for example, I'm shooting someone tomorrow that it's going alongside a book excerpt, and I've read that. But
Yeah.
I try to I try to pick them. Sometimes you don't, and then you'll walk away and read something the next day, and you're like, oh my god, I didn't know any of that. Oh my god, that's just ridiculous. Like I think when I shot Red Simons, I knew some stuff had happened, but didn't really know the specifics. And then, like, I didn't know that his son had died. Maybe I think knew he'd been sick, but didn't know about his son. And then he kept on saying things about that, and then I walked away kind of feeling like a bit of an idiot that I didn't know. But you can't, you know this, you can't win them all. But yeah, it's a funny,
Well,
like some people will just do so much research, and just have a head full of knowledge, which I can see the merit in that. But then sometimes it might kind of take away the spontaneity. I think I'm still figuring this out for myself, but I think it's kind of that kind of thing as well, where you don't want, you just want to interact with someone as a person. You want to kind of discover things naturally sometimes, but then, I guess
yeah.
the flip side
But
is sometimes, you want to know about things and be prepared, but yeah.
it's so interesting. They're such interesting questions because I guess a photograph is about the moment that the photograph's
Mm.
taken, and that's like how much does that moment need to hold? Does it need to hold that person's past? I
Hmm.
mean, it's like as
Hmm.
the responses to those photos that you've spoken about, like the Dan Andrews one and the George Calombaris one. It's almost like your photos apparently held the future as well. So it's really
Mm.
interesting, like what are the different expanses that this flat image can expand into or reach for.
Totally,
It's so
totally, and it's
interesting.
funny. It's funny with that George thing as well. Like I mean, I'm not a particularly massive fan of the guy. Like, I don't really, I just kind of have no massive feelings either way. But I do have really strong feelings about fairness. And, you know, when we did that shoot, it was really interesting because, I mean, I assume you've had a lot to do with him as well. But the last time I shot him, it was upstairs at Hellenic and Q, and he was doing, I think he was filming like a training video about like apprentice training. He was doing these recipes. He was doing the shoot. He was doing like four things at once, and he was manic. He was absolutely manic. He's barking orders, and I've got this great photo where he's kind of looking squinty-eyed and just kind of barking at the camera. And it's not really flattering, but I love it. I think it's just one of my favorite photos of a person. But compare that to this time when the whole piece was about mental health and chefs coping with things. And obviously, at that point, he'd
Yeah.
had a lot happen. Like he'd had the whole punching at the footy thing happen. There had been allegations, and so he'd obviously had to really find a way to center himself. And he walked into that studio, sat on that chair, and I said, just do your thing, just do your meditation, and he shut his eyes, and it was quite amazing. Like it was really beautiful. Like he just went into himself, he breathed, and he sat there, and the silence was just absolutely delicious. And it was just like the only thing you could hear is the shutter and the flash going off. And it was amazing. Like it was absolutely amazing. And I really do think the guy has undergone like, true transformation. And that's not me, like I have people say to me, oh, you're mates with him. Like I'm not mates with him. Like I have no interest in this at all. Like, and I think what really bothered me was that truth was getting overlooked. And I think there was
Mm.
people that had an agenda that saying, well, he wants to do this. Like, no, the $8.8 million, whatever it was how much has been paid back. And like, I'm not, like, I don't think he's perfect. I don't think the industry's perfect. I don't think the organizations are perfect, but I didn't really buy it that it was an active thing. And so then all these, I had to shut this Instagram feed post down because I
Whoa.
just had people going absolutely bananas on me. It's like, listen, I'm just a photographer. I'm not,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
trying to give the guy a fucking chance, man. Like I'm not, I don't care about like of course like I have empathy for him, but it's not. I have no interest. I have no financial interest or anything like that.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah. It's so
so it's
interesting.
just
It's so,
funny.
I mean, it goes to the power of the images that you take. And I remember that story. It was a lot about that, you know, George had this, like a real personality shift, and he had centered himself. And it was, I mean, it was pretty unfortunate for the magazine that he
Total
sort of
bummer.
looked like he had a halo. I think the text around his head was in a halo, and then it was like that come out
Well,
on
it
the
was a
Saturday.
semicircle. The idea was, yeah,
The
totally, and
Friday
it's
or Thursday, Friday, the wage scandal really, like, you know,
yeah,
really hit the fan. So,
totally, total bummer.
so interesting. So interesting. Okay, so the other photo that I want to talk about, and I recalled this week when the image that you took at Attica featured on a cover story that I had in Good Food this week about restaurants and reopening in Melbourne, and a bit of a round
Yep.
table around that. And
Yep.
yeah, so tell me about that shoot. They're just such great
So
images,
that
and
shoot
you.
was
Let me just
for
yeah, it was a good weekend. I just want to give Michael Harry a shout out for that great piece as well.
what a
It was
guy.
really great. Yeah.
What a
So yeah,
guy. Yeah. What a
tell us
swan
about
song.
that image.
I miss that man. Yeah, so that was a fun one. That one, I mean, Ben and I have a pretty solid friendship, I'd say. And I'm just trying to remember. Yeah, so Tegan, I believe, the photo editor at Good Weekend, commissioned it, and you know, we just kind of talked through ideas and that kind of thing. You know, I had been to Attica for, you know, I think since I did another story there for someone else. Um, and like, just, I mean, obviously no one else has really been to Attica except for a few people, you know, other people working. Obviously, you know, you're familiar with it, but just to paint a picture for the listener, like, if you've ever been there, it doesn't look like that at the moment. Like you know, you go into the beautiful private dining room with those amazing, you know, burnt timber walls. And it's like a storeroom. Like there's stuff stacked to the roof. You know, there's KitchenAids, there's boxes of, you know, cutlery and, you know, takeaway stuff. It's like it's a, you know, it's a war room almost. You know, like it's amazing. Like it's not the Attica we're used to. And so the piece that Michael wrote was really beautiful, and I think probably one of few, if any, pieces about Ben and Attica, you know, kind of post, you know, his relationship change and post, you know, him kind of, I guess, discovering another side of himself, I think, you know, as far as fitness and a lot of that kind of stuff. Which I think he did a really great job of really being really sensitive about that, which Michael does really well. He's really respectful of people. And I think, and this is a funny, like what we were talking about before, like I wonder whether, you know, the pictures we got were kind of partially because we've got a relationship. Because I know Ben can be really, really fiercely protective of himself and his restaurant, you know, and brand, and, you know, rightly so. Um, but it was really beautiful because we kind of, you know, we were in that mid period where lockdown was finished. Um, you know, we kind of like, yeah, come in, what do you want to do? And we kind of set up a couple of pictures and took some great, you know, portraits of him kind of sitting in front of the never give up that he'd sprayed in the dining room. You know, then we took some in front of the piles of stuff in the private dining room. You know, we took some photos of him and Kylie. You know, that kind of stuff. And then we thought we'd take some in the kitchen as well. And I just kind of, you know, just when you kind of walk round into the kitchen, you know, you just see it. It's right there. It's huge. It's like, it's not subtle at all. Like it's, you know, to the roof. He's obviously, you know, stood on the bench and sprayed it. And I think that
Spray,
shot
yeah,
might
just
have actually.
sprayed never give up, just so people, in case people didn't hear. So it's got
Oh
never give
yeah,
up
so
in black spray paint on the wall in the Attica
yeah,
kitchen.
literally, you know, I remember seeing the video on Instagram. He got his rattle can and got up there and, you know, like nothing, you know, it's so different to the antithesis of the restaurant. Everything's so carefully thought out and, you know, beautifully meticulously made. And it's like, you know, up there. But it's huge. Like it's not, you know, you can't miss it. And so I think that particular shot might have actually been a lighting test, but I remember looking, I'm like, I love it. That looks great. That is so cool. Like just so, you know, graphic. But I remember both Michael and Ben were like, oh, probably a bit too grim for us, you know. So we better put some people in there. And so the cover that Good Weekend ran was Ben. I believe it was the one where he was just kind of talking to someone off frame, you know, out of frame. Um, but with him not in it, it's very different. Which I was, yeah, I didn't even know that was running in Good Food, but it was quite a nice surprise to see it though. Um, but yeah, it's funny. As a slight, two things I want to say about it. There's a slight side topic. I've had conversations with one or two other quite prominent chefs, and one of them made the comment that he said, "Well, it's a really nice, that's a nice luxury to have the privilege of not being able to give up," which I thought was an interesting thought. But I think the energy behind what Ben was saying is, just is like, no, we're going to keep on going. We're going to keep, we're going to beat this. We have to. We can't not. I think, whereas I think the other person who I won't name was a bit more like, well, what if you have to? Like, what if this crushes you? Like, yeah, we need to be able to say that it's okay. Sometimes it's okay to walk away, but you know, it, I'm not sure exactly where I'm going with that, but it's an interesting thought experiment. I guess it's kind of looking at it from both sides. Sometimes
Yeah.
there's actually the smartest thing. But I'd also want to say there's another kind of cute thing that happened. Maybe not a cute thing, but when we were back on set doing a shoot in, I want to say March. No, not March. July. I found an email because I'd set up a new website, and the email had been going to a different email that I'd set up, and I found this email that had gone to come from my little contact form, and it was from this lady who'd seen that cover, and she's going through breast cancer treatment, and that cover had just been a thing that she's kind of held on to, never give up, and
Wow.
she's emailing me, yeah, and she's emailing me saying, oh, it was the last thing that we did was have this amazing Attica dinner, and it was just that, it just kind of kept me going, and just remembering it kind of kept me, vital, and kept me, fighting. And I was wondering if I could buy a print of it. I'm like, of course you can. Wow, that's crazy. I'm so sorry that I didn't see your email for months because it went to my other thing. And I just thought she was going to say that she wanted like an 8 by 10 or something. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. How big is it? She's like, oh, I don't know, like a meter.
Oh, cool.
And so she's ordered this like meter by something print. Like, so can you get it framed too? I'm like, of course I can get it framed. And then I was like, I feel like I should check with Ben. And Ben's like, yeah, whatever she needs, like, of course. I picked it up the other day, and in my permitted activities, I can, as a printing and support services professional, I can deliver prints. And I took her around, and she's like, it's amazing because it looks crazy. It is so big, and it looks so good. It printed so beautifully. It's like so. I think it was a different one of the shots. So it was one where he's actually looking at the camera. But you never know where your photos are going to end up, and this is a nice little thing there. But
Yeah, that's so nice. Well, let's talk about food photography, Kris. 'Cause,
sure.
I love your food photos. Can you tell us a little bit about how you approach a shot? Do you wait for the dish to speak to you, or do you get out your special pasta lens? What do you do?
uh, I I approach food, I would say, differently to many people. I mean, I always thought that everyone could shoot food, but it turns out, not everyone can. But I don't really treat it that much differently from any other image. And I think the most important thing about taking photos is that it has to be compelling. Like the photo has to make you want to look at it, and it has to kind of, it has to get an emotional response. So and I guess that's that kind of, dark magic combination of, composition and lighting and all those kind of things. But, there's the kind of the basic rules, light from the side, um, focus on the protein, yada, yada, yada. Like, you just kind of want to make it arresting. Like, it has to kind of, look at you, like I've got little things I do. Like, I don't like shooting them in landscape. I prefer shooting portrait and crop down because that's just how it looks good to me.
Ah,
Um, Yeah, I mean, just these little technique things. But I think what it comes down to though is just about it being arresting, and it has to, you have to keep going until you can do that. But yeah, there's like, like I can talk technique, sure, but I think it's mostly really about, that it has to, you need a little bit of drama in there. You need to kind of, you need to set it up so it can, so it can speak to you, and so that, you have to want to be hungry.
Yeah. Kris, I remember when you shot some dishes of mine, and when you're talking about mood and making you want to look at it and making you want to eat it, my food looked so dramatic. Like it looked like it was gonna win an Oscar just for sitting on the bench. It just
I remember looking at it. I'm like, God, you didn't ask me again because I made a food like it was a serial killer or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it was like
what was it? It's like Shane's hummus or something maybe, and then I was walking past. I got coffee at Seven Seeds the other day, and that was next to that Thai joint, and it was a Little Fish Thai. Was it? Is that where she was from?
Oh yeah, Pla, yeah, Middle Fish.
That's right. We did her Middle Fish. That's right. We did her food, didn't we?
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm actually thinking of these. I think it was just granola bars, which I just did as an extra dish. It was like a super quick recipe, and you made it, look like like these granola bars could actually be a serial killer. They looked incredibly dramatic, but it was great.
You know what it was? It was because I don't think I'd ever used like a DOP's light before. It's because she had the film guys in, and they had that great big massive, Hollywood lighting up, and I was like, cool, I'll just be over here with the spill. Thank you very much. Whereas I'm used to kind of having to, make my own sunshine with flash and whatever, and so I think I was just maybe I got a little bit too excited. What was down at Laneway? What was that, Caroline's studio?
Yeah, we're at a studio in Hawthorne. Caroline Velick, food stylist to the stars.
There we go.
And me.
There we go.
Kris, this is probably the most annoying question to ask you, so I'm going to leave you with it.
That's all right.
Everyone needs to take great food photos these days on their phones. We don't have the sunshine flash and the spill from the film crew. How can us newbie amateurs just get a decent snap to put on Instagram?
I said something recently to Pat Nurse that I thought was a throwaway, but apparently it transformed his phone photography, and that is, if you have an iPhone with a portrait thingy, there's a little 2x button, press that, and then the phone has an inbuilt longer lens, and by that I mean you've got a wide lens, and then you got which is the normal one. I think the newer one's even got an extra wide lens, but then it also has a longer one, which means that it doesn't get as much in, so you have to get back a little bit, which means it forces you to have a better perspective on the food. So if you've got a wide lens and you get right up, it kind of might be a little bit distorted, or you might have too much other things around it. If you can use the portrait mode or the 2x lens, it will, it gives you the opportunity to kind of center in on the dish or whatever, and it will look a lot more pleasing. You'll find.
I love it. That is great.
Pat came back to me like months later. He's like, "Oh my God, you changed everything." I'm like, "Oh, my pleasure, Pat. No worries."
Well, everyone should check out.
I think I just leaned. I think I just leaned over like a smart ass and pressed the 2x button on his phone, and then that was it.
Okay,
but that's that, and then keep the light clean, and you'll be good.
Okay, we'll be good, but we won't be as good as you. Kristoffer Paulsen, thank you so much for coming along to have a chat to Dirty Linen, and see you out there in Foodland when we're allowed to.
Hopefully. One day.
It's going to happen.
See you on the internet.
See ya. This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinenat.deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.
Sorry, we're getting a new couch and I forgot that was happening now. Is there a way we can pause for like 5 minutes? I just have to run upstairs and get some cash out of an envelope and give it to the guy. Hang on. Sorry, 1 sec.
Yep, do it.
I'm so sorry. Hang on.
It's all good. No worries.